The trouble started the moment Zoe Campbell heard the auction bell clang across the Guthrie yard. It was the kind of sharp, metallic sound that seemed to slice through a person's nerves, and Zoe felt it settle straight into her chest. She stood at the edge of the Oklahoma auction grounds, the June sun beating down on her shoulders, the dust rising around her boots like restless ghosts. Folks crowded in tight circles, talking fast, bargaining hard, all of them chasing luck in the last scraps of the American frontier. Zoe didn't come for luck. She came for survival. Ever since her husband died 3 years ago, she'd held their ranch together with grit and stubborn will. 60 acres of rough Oklahoma soil wasn't much, but it was hers, and she had worked every inch of it with the kind of determination that leaves a body sore and a heart heavy. Now her last working horse had gone lame, and without a strong stallion to pull the plow, her fall wheat would never go in the ground. No wheat meant no money. No money meant losing the ranch, so today mattered more than anything. "Lot 27!" the auctioneer shouted, his voice rising over the crowd. "Fine bay stallion, 8 years old, strong as a steam engine." Quote. Zoe's breath caught when she saw him led into the ring. A powerful bay with a bright coat, wide chest, and the calm eyes of a horse who knew his purpose. This was the one. The horse she'd saved for by selling eggs, trading preserves, even pawning her mother's brooch. She could almost feel her late husband's hand on her shoulder, steadying her, telling her this was the right choice. Startin' at $20. Zoe's hand lifted before she even thought. That was half her budget, but she was ready to fight for what she needed. 25. Edgar Thorne boomed from across the ring. Zoe stiffened. Of all people, Edgar Thorne, wealthy, conniving, and hungry for more land. His ranch was already 3 times the size of hers, yet he still showed up at every auction like a wolf looking for another lamb. 30! Zoe called, refusing to back down. The bidding climbed. Her palms grew damp. $40. That was her limit. She couldn't spare a penny more if she wanted feed for winter. Then Thorne said, 45, in a bored tone, as if tossing away coins meant nothing to him. Everything inside Zoe sunk like a stone. She shook her head when the auctioneer glanced her way. She couldn't go higher. "Sold to Mr. Thorne." The gavel cracked against the wood, sealing her failure in front of half the town. Zoe turned away, swallowing hard. Without that bay stallion, her ranch didn't stand a chance. "Lot 28!" the auctioneer shouted. "Gray stallion! 7 years old! Good temperament!" Zoe barely looked up. The gray horse was plain, sway-backed, nothing special. She wasn't here for him. She was here for a horse big enough to pull a plow, a horse she had just lost. "Starting at 15! Do I hear 20?" The crowd had lost interest. Folks murmured, but no hands went up. Zoe rubbed the sweat from her brow, thinking how she might borrow money or trade labor to scrape together more funds before next month's auction. 15 going once. She shifted her hat. 15 going twice. Quote. She brushed away a fly. $40! The crowd gasped. Zoe froze. The auctioneer's eyes were locked on her. 40 to Mrs. Campbell! Her heart dropped. She stared at her own hand, still raised. When had she lifted it? A second ago? Out of habit? Out of distraction? "No! I didn't!" The gavel slammed. "Sold to Mrs. Campbell for 40!" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, "Poor woman bought the wrong horse." Another chuckled, "She'll be plowing fields with a saddle pony." Zoe felt heat crawl up her neck. Shame, anger, panic. All of it tangled until she could barely speak. But rules were rules. A bid was binding. And she had just spent every dollar she had on a horse she didn't want, couldn't use, and didn't even mean to buy. "Fine," she said through clenched teeth, handing over her money. The gray stallion was brought to her. Up close he looked even less impressive, though his eyes were soft and calm. That only made her feel worse. "Come on, then," she muttered, taking the lead rope. She walked the long 5 miles home, with Clover carrying her saddle while she dragged a horse she believed had ruined her future. Rage battled with despair in her chest. Her late husband's brother had once told her she would fail. That ranching wasn't women's work. And now, Maybe he had been right. By the time she reached the ranch at sunset, her throat felt tight, her future sealed. She settled the gray stallion into a stall and leaned against the stall door, exhausted. "You better find a way to earn your keep," she whispered to him, "because you just cost me everything." She didn't know then that this wrong horse was about to change her life forever. For the first 3 days, Zoe tried her best to pretend that buying the gray stallion was not the biggest mistake she had ever made. She kept her jaw tight, her shoulders square, and her heart guarded as she went about her chores. She fed him, watered him, brushed him down, and refused to look into those soft eyes that seemed to understand far too much. She named him Silver only because his coat shone faintly like worn coin under the barn lanterns. She didn't want to get attached. She planned to sell him the moment she found someone foolish enough to buy a horse too fine-boned for plow work. But life had a strange way of forcing truth into the open. On the 4th morning, she tried hitching Silver to the plow. He stood still, ears forward, willing enough, but clueless. When the harness touched his sides, he sidestepped like a puzzled child. When the plow rattled behind him, he froze, trembling, not from fear but confusion. "You've never pulled a thing in your life," Zoe muttered, unbuckling the straps. "What use are you to me?" Silver blinked at her with such earnest innocence that she had to look away. Yet something about him, something didn't fit with the picture of a useless auction mistake. Every time she moved across the ranch, whether to fix a broken rail or scatter feed for the hens, Silver watched her like a student studying a teacher. Not fearful, not restless, just focused. Too focused. And when she rode him for the first time, the entire world shifted. Zoe swung into the saddle expecting a choppy stride and stiff turns. What she got was a horse who moved like flowing water, light, smooth, miraculously sensitive to her weight. She barely pressed her heels, and he was already stepping into a canter that stole her breath. "What in heaven's name?" she whispered as he floated across the pasture. Silver wasn't strong enough to pull a plow, but he was built for something she couldn't yet name. She rode out to the north fence line to check the damage left from a recent storm. As she hammered new rails in place, 3 cattle wandered toward the gap, curious and slow. Before she could even reach for her rope, Silver moved, on his own. He slipped between the cattle and the opening, angling his body just right. A shift to the left, a step to the right, guiding them back with the calm skill of a seasoned ranch hand. Zoe stood frozen, hammer in hand. Her heart pounded. Horses didn't do that. Not on their own. Not unless... "No, that can't be," she whispered. But the idea dug deep. She rode him straight into town that evening, dust swirling around them like sparks. She needed answers. Virgil Watkins, the auctioneer, was locking up his office when she arrived. "Virgil," she called, sliding off Silver's back, "I need to know where this horse came from." He looked up, surprised. "Trouble with him?" "Not trouble," she said, breathless. "Something else." Virgil checked his ledger, running his thick finger down a column until he stopped. His brows lifted. "Well now," he murmured, "he came from the Redfield Ranch up near Ponca City." Zoe's heartbeat stumbled. The Redfield Ranch wasn't just any ranch. It was famous across the territory for breeding cutting horses, special horses trained to sort cattle with lightning instincts and uncanny precision. "Virgil," Zoe said slowly, "why would a ranch like that sell a horse here?" He shrugged. Maybe they didn't need him anymore. Maybe he wasn't good enough. But Zoe didn't believe that. Not when she thought of the way he'd glided under her in the saddle. Not when she remembered the deliberate way he'd turned those cows. The next morning, she saddled Silver at dawn, determination burning through her doubts. She rode to the herd and singled out a spotted heifer with a habit of breaking away. "All right," she whispered, "show me who you really are." Silver lowered his head slightly, ears sharp, muscles coiled. The heifer bolted left. Silver was there first. She darted right. He blocked her path, clean as a gate shutting. She zigzagged, desperate. Silver matched her every move like he'd read her mind before she could act. Zoe sat in the saddle with tears stinging her eyes. "Dear Lord," she breathed, "you're a cutting horse." Somehow, by accident, she had bought a horse worth more money than her entire ranch. But it wasn't just his value that stunned her. It was the feeling, this wild, unexpected sense that maybe fate hadn't punished her. Maybe it had handed her a miracle wrapped in dust and doubt. That very afternoon, Reverend Dalton came knocking. He needed help sorting cattle. He offered $5 for a day's work. $5. Zoe hesitated only long enough to glance at Silver. "I'll take the job," she said. By sundown, Silver had sorted every cow with clean precision. Dalton was so impressed he told half the town. Then came the livery owner, then the Fletchers, then the Johnsons, then ranchers from miles away. Word spread fast. Zoe Campbell had a horse like no other. Silver didn't just help her survive, he helped her rise. A month passed, then another. Her savings grew, her confidence grew. Folks who once pitied her now respected her. Some envied her. And one man, the last man she expected, rode up her driveway near sunset one evening. Edgar Thorne. He dismounted stiffly, hat in hand, pride swallowed. "Mrs. Campbell," he said, voice hard but respectful. "I need cattle sorted. 200 head. My boys say you're the best in the territory. Will you take the job?" Zoe kept her face calm, though inside her heart surged with triumph. "For a herd that size," she said, "I charge $10 a day, 3 days at least." Thorne didn't flinch. "Done." Quote. As he rode away, Zoe turned toward the barn where Silver stood watching her. Her throat tightened. The wrong horse had become her greatest chance. But fate wasn't finished yet. A stranger was coming, and he held the answer to Silver's true past, an answer that would shake everything Zoe thought she knew. The cool air of early October carried the smell of dry leaves across Zoe Campbell's ranch when a lone rider appeared on the horizon. Zoe stood near the barn stacking hay when she spotted him, an older man with a straight-backed posture and the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of working cattle. His black stallion moved with confidence, every step sure and steady. Silver lifted his head the moment the rider approached, his ears pricked forward. His tail swished once, as if he recognized the man long before Zoe did. The rider slowed to a stop in front of her porch. "Mrs. Campbell?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said, brushing dust from her hands. "Can I help you?" The man removed his hat. "My name is David Redfield. I believe you have a gray stallion named Silver." Quote. Zoe's heart dropped. She felt the world tilt just a little. Was he here to take Silver back? Could he even do that? She swallowed hard. "I do. Is something wrong?" A slow smile spread across Redfield's weathered face. "Nothing wrong at all. I just wanted to meet the woman who's been making history with one of my horses." "Yours?" Zoe's voice cracked. "Yes, ma'am. I bred him myself. Trained him, too." Redfield glanced toward the pasture where Silver watched them with calm patience. "Silver was the best cutting horse I ever raised." Zoe stared at him in disbelief. "Then why was he at a small-town auction? Why didn't you sell him privately?" "A horse like him would bring hundreds." Redfield sighed, resting his hand on the saddle horn. "Because he shouldn't have been there. I sent a few horses to the Guthrie auction with my foreman. 3 unbroken yearlings and an old mare ready for retirement. Silver was supposed to stay home. But my foreman was drinking that morning, mixed up the paperwork, loaded Silver with the others." Zoe pressed a hand to her forehead. "You mean he was sent there by mistake?" "Yes, ma'am. I realized it too late. By the time I got word, the auction was over, and he'd been sold." Fear clawed at Zoe's chest. "Are you here to take him back?" Redfield looked straight at her. "No, I'm here to see where he ended up, and after hearing what you've done with him, I'd be a fool to take him away." Zoe exhaled so hard her knees nearly buckled. Relief swept over her like warm rain. Redfield continued. "Silver was always special. Too small to impress buyers, too plain to attract attention, but he had more cow sense than any horse I ever trained." Zoe's eyes softened. I didn't know what he was at first. I thought I'd ruined my life buying him." Redfield chuckled. "Sometimes a mistake is just fate in disguise." He reached into his coat and handed her a folded paper. "Silver's breeding papers! He's got championship bloodlines! If you stand him at stud, he'll earn you a fine income." Zoe opened the paper with trembling fingers. It felt like holding the beginning of a new life. "Thank you," she whispered. Redfield tipped his hat. "No, ma'am, thank you. Silver is right where he belongs." As he rode off, Zoe walked to the pasture. Silver nickered softly when she approached. She pressed her forehead to his. "You saved me," she murmured. "I thought you were a burden. Turns out you were my blessing." From that day forward, everything changed. By spring of 1904, Zoe had paid every debt she owed. She built a new barn with stalls for mares brought in for breeding. 2 ranch hands joined her operation, both eager to learn from the woman whose horse could do the work of 3 men. Her small herd grew to 50 cattle. She repaired her farmhouse, painted the porch, planted flowers her husband once dreamed of growing. A girl named Lucy, her neighbor's daughter, apprenticed under her. The young girl had soft hands and a brave heart, and Zoe saw in her the spark of someone who deserved a chance. One evening, Lucy sat beside Zoe on the porch. "My father says I should marry soon," she said quietly. "He says a woman has no business working cattle." Quote. Zoe drifted her gaze toward the pasture where Silver grazed under the fading light. "Lucy," she said softly, "I once bought the wrong horse. At least, that's what the world thought. Turned out he was exactly what I needed. People will tell you who you should be. But life doesn't follow their plans. Follow your own." A year later, Zoe returned to the Guthrie auction with Lucy and 2 new apprentices. She walked the grounds not as a desperate widow, but as a respected horsewoman. When a plain chestnut mare entered the ring, Lucy's eyes brightened. The mare wasn't flashy, but her movements were balanced, her eyes intelligent. Zoe leaned over. She might be something special. "I wish I could bid," Lucy whispered. "I'll stake you," Zoe said. "Everyone deserves their own silver." Lucy bought the mare for $16, her hands shaking as she signed the slip. "What if she's a mistake?" Lucy asked. Zoe smiled, remembering her own past. "Then it might be the best mistake you ever make." Quote. By 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, Zoe Campbell owned the most successful horse training and cattle operation in the region. Silver's bloodlines spread across the territory, known for intelligence and heart. Silver lived to be 23, spending his final years grazing peacefully on the land he had saved. And whenever new apprentices came to the ranch, nervous and unsure, Zoe would tell them, "Sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Sometimes the wrong horse is the right one. Trust your journey."